Dahl, the Witches, illustrated by Kingdom Blank. My grandmother picked up her cigar and took another puff, allowing the full smoke differently in her lungs. Where does the Grand High Witch live when she's at home? I asked. Nobody knows, my grandmother said. If we knew that, then she could be rooted out and destroyed. Then witchfields all over the world have spent their lives trying to discover the secret headquarters of the Grand High Witch. What is a witchfield, Grandmama? A person who studies witches and knows a lot about them, my grandmother said. I am a retired witchfield, she said. I am too old to be active any longer, but when I was younger, I traveled all over the globe trying to track down the Grand High Witch. I never came even close to succeeding. Is she rich? I asked. She's rolling, my grandmother said. Simply rolling in money. Rumor has it that there's a machine in her headquarters which is exactly like the machine the government used to print the banknotes you and I use. After all, banknotes are only bits of paper with special designs and pictures on them. Anyone can make them who has the right machine and the right paper. I guess it's that the Grand High Witch makes all the money she wants and she dishes out to the witches everywhere. What about foreign money? I asked. Those monies can be Chinese money if you want them to, my grandmother said. It's only a question of pressing the right button. But Grandmama, I said, if nobody has ever seen the Grand High Witch, how can you be so sure she exists? My grandmother gave long and very severe look. Nobody has ever seen the devil, she said, but we know he exists. The next morning, we sailed for England, and soon I was back in an old family house in Kent, but this time, only my grandmother to look after me. Then the Easter term began, and every weekday, I went to school, and everything seemed to have come back to normal again. Now, at the bottom of our garden, there was an enormous concord tree, and higher up in its branches, Timmy, my best friend, and I started to build a magnificent tree house. We were able to work on it only at the weekends, but I were getting along fine. We had begun with the floor, which we built laying wild planks between two quite far apart branches and nailing them down. Within a month, we had finished the floor. Then we constructed a wooden railing around the floor and then left for only a room to build. The roof was difficult bit. On Saturday afternoon, when Timmy was in bed with flu, I decided to make a start on the roof all by myself. It was lovely being high up and the concord tree all alone with the pale leaves coming out everywhere around me. It was like being in a big green cave, and the hay made it extra exciting. My grandmother had told me if I fell, I would break a leg. Every time I looked down, I got a tingle along my spine. I worked away, nailing the first plank on the roof. Then suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a sight of a woman standing immediately below me. She was looking up at me and smiling the most peculiar way. When most people smile, their lips go sideways. This woman's lips went upwards and downwards, showing all her front teeth and gums. The gums were like raw meat. It's a shock to discover you're being watched when you think you're alone. And what does this strange woman do in our garden anyway? I noticed that she was wearing a small black hat, and she had big gloves on her hands, and gloves came nearly into her elbows. Gloves! She was wearing gloves! I froze all over. I have a present for you, she said, still staring at me, still smiling, still showing her teeth and gums. I didn't answer. "Come down out of the tree, little boy," she said, "and I shall give you the most exciting present you've ever had." Her voice had a curious rasping quality. It made a sort of metallic sound, as though her throat was full of dropping pins. Without taking her eyes from my face, she very slowly put down the gloved hands into her purse and drew out a small green snake. She held it up for me to see. "It's tame," she said. The snake began to coil itself around her forearm. It was brilliant green. "If you come down here, I shall gift him to you," I said. "Oh, Grandmama," I thought, "come and help me." Then I panicked. I dropped the hammer and shot that enormous tree like a monkey. I didn't stop until I was as high as I could possibly go, and there I stayed, quivering with fear. I couldn't see the woman now. There were layers and layers of leaves between her and me. I stayed up there for hours and I kept very still. It began to grow dark. At last I heard my grandmother calling my name. "I'm up here," I shouted back. "Come down at once," she called out. "It's past your supper time." "Grandmama," I shouted. "Has the woman gone?" "One woman," my grandmother called back. "The woman in the black gloves." There was a silence from below. It was a silence of nobody who was too stunned to speak. "Grandmama," I shouted again. "Has she gone?" "Yes," my grandmother answered at last. "She's gone. I'm here, my darling. I'll look after you. You can come down now." I climbed down. I was trembling. My grandmother enfolded me in her arms. "I've seen a witch," I said. "Come inside," she said. "You'll be all right with me." She led me into the house and gave me a cup of hot cocoa with lots of sugar in it. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her. By the time I had finished, it was my grandmother who was trembling. Her face was ashy and gray, and I saw her glance down to her hands that didn't have a thumb. "You know what this means," she said. "It means that there is one of them in our district. From now on, I'm not letting you walk alone to school." "Do you think she could be after me specially?" I asked. "No," she said. "I doubt that. One child is as good as any other of those little creatures." It is hardly surprising that after that I became very witch-conscious as a little boy. If I happened to be alone on the road and I saw a woman approaching who was wearing gloves, I would quickly skip across to the other side, and as the weather remained pretty cold during the whole that month, near everywhere